simple solution. I got a card while you speak. Brian, your Central Committee precinct is open. No, I will not be running. Equal time, I would have to offer anybody else who is running equal time because I have a radio program. But you know what? I am married to an extraordinary woman that I'm going to pass this card off to. Far better than me, that's for sure. And now we come to time, the keynote speaker, a man that I've gotten to know over the radio program over the years, the president and CEO of an unbelievable organization, FreedomWorks. I know you're all familiar with it. He's been with it for 17 years. An economist. He understands the reality of dollars and cents. He knows that reducing taxes results in the much-needed tax revenue that the federal government, particularly the leftists, crave so much. If you lower taxes, the revenue of the government increases. Why is it the left hates that reality so much? I do not understand. It's a fact. You and I may disagree with what they want to spend the money on, but if they want more money in the federal government, if they want to reduce the deficit, they want increased taxation revenues, then they want to lower taxes. It increases all of our prosperity, but therein is the reality. That's not truly what the left is interested in. What the left is interested in is kneecapping you and I. Taking away our disposable income, reducing the consumption, the rapacious consumption of America. That is ultimately what the left is all about. We need to come to grips with that. Matt Kibbe is all about that. You've read his books. I tell you what, he's just profound in his insight and intellect. He is a champion for what we're talking about, and as an extension of all of the other speakers, and some additional insights into what we're here for tonight and how we can make good on our challenge. Ladies and gentlemen, FreedomWorks, Matt Kibbe!
This feels a little bit like a family reunion. Can we give it up for him out here? I've been hanging out with you guys for so long. I remember when this movement in this area was about a dozen people, and everybody thought we were crazy. And we probably were. Where's John Boehner, by the way? I thought he would be here. Isn't he right up the road? Are you guys not getting along anymore? I was sitting in O'Hare Airport thinking about Cincinnati and remembering, as Jenny Beth pointed out, that this is where it all went down. You remember? I still remember the day that Lois Lerner threw the line workers in Cincinnati under the bus for something that turned out to be anything but a few rogue agents. The most remarkable thing about the IRS scandal, 5 years on, 4 years on, whatever it is how long it went on, how many people were involved, this ongoing conversation about targeting specific groups of Americans who would abuse. That's very different than how J. Edgar Hoover went after Martin Luther King and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. That was a targeted effort to go after a political enemy, but this was an agency. It's more interesting when you realize that today all of those IRS agents on mandate day, it's no longer tax day, by the way, it's mandate day, the day that you comply with Obamacare, whether you like to or not. About 52% of those that receive subsidies under Obamacare misestimated their annual income and have to pay an average of $500 back to the IRS. The IRS won't answer your call, by the way, if you're trying to figure out how exactly Obamacare works. It's even worse for people that decided not to comply, right? Because there's an individual mandate, particularly if you're young. also happen to belong to a union. It's called the Treasury Employees Union. They effectively and successfully lobbied to keep themselves exempt from Obamacare. You guys remember this, right? So the very guys that are coming after you were smart enough to realize that this was going to be a train wreck, and they were getting their tail ends out of it, including the head of the IRS. He said, I prefer the plan I have. Anyone here prefer the plans they have before? Well, guess what? You're not a member of an elite class of bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. with union representation. If you think about it, today there's about 4.5 million federal employees. That's a lot of people. Most of them belong to a union. Most of them are effectively unfireable. Jobs for life. Compare that to Walmart. Walmart's a pretty big company, right? About 2 million people work for Walmart. The difference is important. When you go to Walmart and that nice lady greets you at the superstore, she says, how can I help you? Why does she do that? Because she knows that she works for you, and you coming back to Walmart is the way that she gets to keep earning her income. You think anyone at the IRS thinks that way? You think that maybe they think that we work for them? This is what's so worrisome about this scandal, and not just about the imperial presidency and the way that the president decides to do things without permission from Congress. There's something bigger going on here, and it certainly didn't start with Barack Obama. All of these unelected bureaucrats, these Schedule C government workers, in all of these alphabet agencies across the federal government, they now represent a lobbyist class that's far bigger than any special interest. Think about that for a minute. We pay them. They hire lobbyists through their union representation to lobby against us. And when that doesn't work, they use the power of their office to target us. What could go wrong with that? What could possibly go wrong? Maybe we've reached this tipping point in this country where the most dangerous thing in America is not an administration. It's not a Congress that's not willing to lead. It's a permanent bureaucratic class, an administrative class that has an agenda that's not particularly ideological. It's all about their futures. It's about their power. It's about their jobs. This, of course, is precisely what the progressives set out to do, right? Go back and read the progressive literature in the late 19th century. It was all about putting the right people in charge. By the way, the right people were from the right families, and they went to the right schools. Insanely elitist stuff. But if we just found the right people and gave them so much power that this push and pull of democracy couldn't possibly fire them, everything was going to turn out just right. And here we are today with this nightmare. And regardless if we go elect president next time, all of these people I'm talking about are still there. Public choice economists predict this, and it's the most dismal of the dismal sciences because they apply self-interest to government. There's actually an economist named James Buchanan who won a Nobel Prize for this really powerful insight that people that go into public office are just as self-interested as the rest of us. Did you guys see that comment? And yet we give them so much power. Public choice predicts that ultimately democracy consumes itself because these special interests, the people that go to government, the people that go cut a deal with the people that control the government, eventually that consumes everything that we are. Kind of depressing, isn't it? We're screwed no matter what, according to these economists. But I think something's changing. I think something fundamental is happening in this country that even John Boehner hasn't noticed yet. John Boehner thinks that grassroots America is represented by the Business Roundtable and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Because back in the day, when John Boehner was a freshman and a sophomore, that's who represented grassroots America in Washington, D.C. All these alphabet associations of the chamber. He doesn't understand what's going on in America. And frankly, I'm just starting to figure it out. Something's different. And I think it has to do with freedom. I'm so old that I remember a day when John Boehner was a conservative. Do you guys remember that? I think it was about 1992 when he actually went down to the House floor with a bag over his head protesting the House banking scandal. That was a long time ago. I'm so old that I remember when this guy that looked a little bit like Captain Kangaroo, I think his name was Cronkite, he used to allocate to every one of us a half hour of news that was pre-chosen by somebody in a gray suit behind closed doors. And whether you liked it or not, at the end of that half hour, he would tell you, that's the way it is. You guys remember that? Couldn't go on Twitter and tell them, no, that's not how it is at all. You had to shut off the TV and believe what your superiors told you was true. I'm so old, I remember when you had to buy music on these strange things called records. You ever bought the records? That guy said, yeah. We had this weird system back in the day when I was a kid where somebody in Los Angeles, some gray-suited Soviet in a music industrial complex would decide for us what music was cool. And when I was a kid in 1977, cool, according to the experts, was Barbara Streisand and Captain Antonio. Does somebody here love Barbara Streisand? Right? And whether we liked it or not, that's what we got to listen to on the radio. And if we went to one of these ancient institutions called a record store, there were stacks and stacks and stacks of Barbara Streisand. And or, if you were lucky, Muskrat Love by the Captain. And as a kid, it just goaded you into revolution. Why did music have to suck so bad? Well, eventually I would sort of break through that system and discover a band called Rush. Any Rush fans here? I'm with friends, for sure. And I took it home and I was excited, and back in the day, with these strange vinyl record albums, you would actually read the liner notes, and on the liner notes of that Rush album it said, dedicated to the genius of Ayn Rand. I'm 13 years old, I have no idea who that guy is. But eventually I stumbled across a book called Anthem that he used garage sale in my hometown. And I devoured it. It was all about the individual. It was all about standing for yourself. It was all about owning your successes and failures. And it really changed the way I thought about the world. Eventually I found The Fountainhead, which was the only other book on the cover, on the inside cover of this very little copy of Anthem. Atlas Shrugged hadn't been conceived of yet. And eventually, going to bookstore after bookstore, much like going to the record store, you eventually find what you want. But it was a fight, it was a journey. Today, of course, if someone is playing Muskrat Love, I go to Spotify and get whatever I want, when I want it. The very long tail of the internet that manages to provide to every person everything they want at a moment's notice, right? You don't have to wait for Walter Cronkite to allocate that half hour of news anymore. Because you can set up your RSS feed and get information in real time from multiple sources in ways that you could not have conceived of when I was 13 years old. I still remember on September 12th, 2009, standing on the stage, looking over the National Mall for the March on Washington. Did anyone go? You guys as surprised as I was at how many people were there? I think Jenny Beth and I were standing up on stage, looking out at this sea of people, at least 1.5 million people. You couldn't even see past the people, even at the top of the hill and stuff, at the top of the stage. And I don't know what Jenny Beth was thinking, but I was thinking to myself, what the hell just happened? I've been organizing grassroots citizens my entire life, and a huge rally was 100 guys that you bust in from across the state. I knew how much we paid for that rally. I knew how much we didn't spend on advertising to get people to show up. What I couldn't have appreciated, and now know, is that that was that moment where the freedom that is inherent in multiple sources of information and social media that breaks down barriers and disrupts top-down institutions like the Republican Party and the Democratic Party was empowering citizens who hadn't had an opportunity to say what they meant to say before. They just didn't know. And if they did know, they didn't know what to do about it. And if somehow we all got together for this March on Washington. I later discovered that it was done through something called NING. Most of you won't remember what that is. It's essentially the rotary phone of social media that has long since been put in the dustbin of history. But people were using online tools to rent a bus, put the deposit down, and reach out to 40 of their unknown best friends and fill a bus. And they did it again, and again, and again, and again. They cut the middleman right out of the process. So did Freedom Works organize the March on Washington? Did Tea Party Patriots? No. But 1 million of our friends did. That's the power of decentralization. I want to read you a quote from a business guru named Clayton Christensen. He came up with this phrase, disruptive innovation. Have you heard the phrase? Think about what Uber and Lyft, these ride-sharing companies, have done to taxi monopolies all over the country. That's disruptive innovation. Think about what Facebook and online media did to the TV networks. That's the kind of disruption we're talking about. Clayton Christensen says an innovation that is disruptive allows a whole new population of consumers at the bottom of the market access to a product or service that was historically only accessible to consumers with a lot of money or a lot of skill. Customers at the bottom of the market access to a product or service that used to be accessible to consumers with lots of money and lots of skill. Apply that, if you would, to the permanent bureaucratic class in Washington, D.C., the insiders, with lots of money and lots of skill, lots of power, the associations they have with the committee chairman, the Chamber of Commerce, public employees unions, everybody that comes to Washington to get that concentrated benefit that it can only come from a government that can take from you and give it to them. Versus the rest of us, the customers at the bottom of the market. Remember we the people? Remember those guys? We have more power today than we've ever had before. I know moms on Facebook that literally have a larger, better knit, more active community on their Facebook page than county GOPs have. I bet you there's some of them in this room today. The marginal cost for you of creating that community was a lot of sweat equity. But you didn't have to do any mass mailings, you didn't have to run any TV ads. That's power. Spreading ideas through social media. I put up our Facebook page here. I forget what it is. It's about 4.6 million people. I asked my guys to run the numbers, and on Facebook on the back end, you can do all sorts of analytics to figure out what's actually going on, who you're reaching, and how many people you're connecting billion people read our stuff. That's billion with a B. Usually you only talk about billions when you're talking about the federal government's deficit, right? Now, as someone that's been organizing grassroots my entire life, I used to think about it a little bit the way that Saul Alinsky did. It was guerrilla warfare. We had to take over the town hall meeting. We had to create the perception that there was more of us than there actually were, because it was expensive to find people like us. And it was expensive to connect, and if you did connect, probably through a mailing or a TV ad, you couldn't keep people connected. You know how much it costs to mail 1.6 billion people? Probably bigger than the budget for the Cincinnati Tea Party. But you don't have to worry about that. So there's a reason that John Boehner's not here tonight. He's scared to death of you guys because you have the power of freedom. So on the one hand, everything is more centralized. Everything in Washington, D.C. is getting worse. And if it's not the Democrats imposing something on us, it's us being frustrated that Republicans either aren't willing or don't know how to use their oversight powers in the Congress to stop some of this bad stuff from happening. But politics is a lagging indicator of social change. Real change comes from the bottom up. Ideas come from the bottom up. The way we cooperate in voluntary association and solve problems and take advantage of local knowledge that's unique to each and every one of us. Think about it. We know what we want. We know what we want to accomplish. We know what we're worried about. We know what we failed at. We know what we're good at. This is a radical idea, but we may actually know what's better for our families in Washington, D.C. Are we allowed to say that anymore? But if you think about all of us coming together with that special knowledge and all of the talents that we have individually in voluntary association, coming together in communities, in creating institutions and solving problems, and creating value, and creating jobs. This is what we believe. We believe in freedom. We believe in free markets and people working together through volunteer action is how you make everything better for everybody. Why don't we apply that same model to social change? Why don't we use the tools that the internet creates for us and organize and develop better ideas and reach out to people that we didn't think would care about who we are or what we're trying to accomplish in Washington, D.C. There's a trend in America. In 44 out of 50 states, there are now more registered independents than there are either Republicans or Democrats. Do you think that's an indication that maybe the two-party duopoly is really not incumbent anymore for the American citizenry? That's an opportunity for us. But we need to ditch some of the code words that we use. We need to stop talking to each other. And I suspect that when we talk about defending the Constitution, we're missing a huge swath of Americans that agree 100% with us. Some people hear that and they think you're talking about a man telling you what to do. And you're talking about the exact opposite, right? You're talking about one set of rules that treats everybody just like everybody else. So let's connect with those values. Let's find a way to create a virtual division of labor so that everybody does something, but nobody has to do things that they don't want to do. Just like in a market. Some people want to go door to door and talk to their neighbors. Other people would die before they did that. Some people want to sit and talk on their phone. Some people want to be on Facebook. Some people want to have reading clubs where you read the sacred text of human action. Anybody in the room do that? Must be somebody. I know Ben probably does. Right back there. All these things matter. But it's most important that you actually do something. And this goes back to this thing would not work unless the American people made it work. They didn't believe in the immaculate conception of a perfect constitution that would hold government in check. They believed in an American population that was willing to protect that freedom day after day after day. When did we forget that job? Things were too good, I suspect. We're a wealthy nation. We have lots of opportunities, even if it's as bad as Bev says it is. But I think we found out something. Government goes to those who show up. And as long as you leave it to Lois Lerner and line agents in the Cincinnati office, you will get what you deserve. So here's our choice. Should we give up because of this massive bureaucratic class that wants to take more of our freedoms, even as they exempt themselves from the same mandates that they impose on the rest of us? Want to give up? Or should we double down? Who wants to double down? I've been doing this stuff in one way or another since I was 13 years old. And I still remember when there was just a dozen of us, and we were surprised to meet each other. A little socially awkward because we thought we were alone. And then, in 2009, there was 1.5 million of us. Today, there may be billions of us. We got to reach that far. We got to do something that's never been done before. Because I believe this country is worth fighting for. You guys? It's such an honor to be with you guys tonight. This is like a family reunion for me. Maybe later when we're getting drinks, we can fight about the things we disagree, just like we do on my Thanksgiving Day table. But in the meantime, connect with someone you don't know yet and do something for liberty. Thank you very much.
Let me just close it out really quickly. I can't really convey the level of gratitude that I feel for people like Matt Kibbe and Jenny Beth Martin, who are not sleeping in their beds tonight because they came here to talk to you, to us. So let's give them, Ben Swan, Ted, Brian Thomas, let's give them another huge round of applause. Thank you to all of our sponsors, Americans for Prosperity, Freedom Works, Tea Party Patriots. Thank you for all of you for coming. One moment of personal note, happy birthday to my little sister Mary, who's in the audience tonight. Thank you all and have a great evening.